He rested his hand on my wife's waist like I wasn't standing 5 feet away, like I didn't exist, like I was part of the decor. A potted plant beside the buffet, sipping water while the real men mingled. My glass stayed level. My hand didn't shake, but inside, something cracked. Let me back up. It was a gala, one of those overly polished corporate charity things, with violinists and shrimp cocktails and speeches that make you check your watch. My wife Lydia had insisted we come, said it would be good to get out, that I needed to be more social again. What she really meant was she wanted to be seen. This was her world now. Consulting, networking, whatever vague ladder she was trying to climb in her midlife renaissance. I'd been content being the quiet retired engineer with a good book and a better bourbon. But no, tonight I was an accessory. She floated across the room like she owned it. Red dress, that wide laugh she saves for public consumption. Hand lingering on forearms too long during introductions. And then there was him. I noticed him before she did. Or maybe not. Maybe she'd clocked him the moment we walked in. His suit was expensive, slim cut, tie loosened just enough to say, "I'm important, but I party." He moved like he assumed you'd get out of his way. When he saw her, he didn't even do the polite glance over to me. Just walked up, grinned, and touched her like she was already his. The hand was firm, low, possessive. It wasn't a joke. Wasn't fleeting. Claimed her. She laughed. Too hard. The kind of laugh you rehearse when you're trying to look flattered but not guilty. Then she glanced over. Saw me. Locked eyes for maybe 2 seconds. And looked away. That was it. That moment broke the room. I didn't say a word. Didn't storm over. I shook a few hands. Made polite comments about the wine. Nodded through a speech about local infrastructure like it wasn't a slap in the face. But I was somewhere else already. Somewhere colder. Somewhere quieter. A place no one would think to look for me. Later that night, after Lydia was asleep. Makeup still on, phone face down, probably still warm from his latest message. I sat in my study. Opened the drawer I hadn't touched in 5 years. Pulled out a brown leather notebook. The kind I used back when I still thought in measurements and margins. I wrote one word on the first page. Connor. I want to pause here for a second. If you're still reading, do me a favor. More than 97% of the people listening never hit that subscribe button. But stories like this, they take time, a team, and one hell of a memory for detail. If you're enjoying it, even just a little, consider subscribing. Keeps us going. Back to the story. The name sat on the page like a blueprint's first line. I didn't need last names yet. I get them. The moment his hand landed on her waist, he became a project. A structure. And every structure, no matter how shiny it looks from the outside, has stress points. Fault lines. I just needed to find his. I didn't feel rage. That would have been easier. Predictable. What I felt was pressure. Internal. Controlled. Like a dam holding back something massive. Not because it's afraid to burst, but because it chooses to. I've spent decades understanding how pressure works. How to use it. How to measure the exact pound per square inch needed to make a bridge fall, without anyone hearing the crack until it's too late. That was what he triggered. Not anger. Not jealousy. Engineering instinct. Structural logic. If he thought I was invisible, he had no idea how dangerous I'd become when no one's watching. And Lydia? She just rolled over in her sleep. Unaware she'd just become the secondary variable in a system she didn't even know existed. She thought I was soft. Passive. A relic. What she forgot is that everything I ever built started with silence. Not noise. I closed the notebook. Put it in my coat pocket. Tomorrow I'd start the real work. Quietly. Mathematically. And when it was done, when the whole damn thing collapsed, they'd both swear it came out of nowhere. But I'd know exactly where it started. Right there. By the shrimp cocktail. The name popped up faster than I expected. Connor Wexley. VP of Acquisitions, Gorman Hale Development Group. Youngest executive at the table. Fast-tracked straight into leadership because someone upstairs either owed someone a favor or mistook loud confidence for competence. Gorman Hale. My firm. Or at least it used to be. 5 years ago, I walked out of that building after 3 decades. Tired, weathered, and done playing politics with 25-year-olds who thought Excel macros made them engineers. I didn't burn bridges. Didn't throw a fit. I shook hands, left quietly, and let them think I was just another founder cashing out. But I didn't cash everything out. When you spend your life designing systems, you learn to build redundancies. Quiet ones. That's what the silent partner agreement was, my backdoor. Legal, buried, and locked with one clause, Clause 17B. Only two people knew it existed: me and Martin Singh, the general counsel I hired in 1998 and trusted with exactly one secret. The clause stated, if any transitional account under my name is accessed or repurposed for unauthorized funding, I retain the right to invoke emergency oversight until a full audit is conducted. I hadn't thought about it in years. Honestly, I never expected it to be triggered. But Connor, the same man who wrapped his fingers around my wife's waist like he was claiming her in a bar fight, had just given me a reason to remember. The company directory hadn't changed much. Same clunky login I set up back when cloud systems were still a novelty. I dug in, searched project approvals under Connor's name. Started with the most recent, Edgewater Phase 2. I recognized it immediately. A waterfront redevelopment plan originally shelved years ago due to environmental pushback. But there it was again. Reopened, rebranded, and approved 6 weeks ago. That was my first flag. I pulled the vendor filings, looked at the subcontracts. For new firms, all approved under emergency discretionary funds. Odd for a mid-tier project. And then I saw it. One of the holding companies listed for bidding, Keen Transitional Holdings. That name should not have existed. Not anymore. I clicked deeper. The account tied to the bid, my old transitional account. It had been closed. Or so I'd thought. Someone reactivated it. Sloppily. A digital trace about as subtle as spray paint on glass. I leaned back, stared at the screen. It was Connor. He tapped into an old shell account under my name, thinking it was some dormant placeholder. He probably thought he was clever, that he found a loophole. The younger ones always do. What he didn't know, what nobody knew, was that account was the exact tripwire for Clause 17B. The moment money passed through it under false authorization, the entire structure shifted. Legally, I was no longer out. I was transitional, invited back in, with oversight, with teeth. I opened the drawer again, pulled out a folder marked Legacy. Inside, a printout of the original partner agreement. Scanned, notarized, sealed, and highlighted in yellow, Clause 17B. I placed it neatly beside my notebook, then opened a new page and wrote one word, Edgewater. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was architecture. Find the load-bearing walls. Pressure test the frame. Watch for signs of failure. And then, collapse. Not all at once. Not with noise. Slowly. Precisely. So that when it falls, they don't even understand how it started. I checked the board roster. Only one person left from my tenure, Linda Brenner, Chief Operations. She'd always liked clean systems. She'd listen if I brought proof. But proof takes patience. And data. I logged into an old Sandbox account Martin had helped me set up back in the day. Quietly downloaded every approval Connor had signed in the past 12 months. 6 had anomalies. 2 were flagrant. 1 tied directly to my wife's so-called consulting gig she'd been considering. Same vendor. Same account trail. I didn't feel shock. Not even anger. I felt alignment. Everything was clicking into place. One project, one clause, one man who never should have laid his hand anywhere near my life. Connor thought he stepped into a casual affair. He didn't realize he'd just wandered into the architectural equivalent of a controlled demolition. And I'd already drawn up the blueprint. The bistro hadn't changed. Same dull taupe walls. Same black and white prints of European streets no one there had ever walked. Even the same scuff on the floor near the corner booth, where the owner's son once dropped a tray of creme brulee. I chose that booth on purpose. Martin arrived 3 minutes late, looking older but sharper than I remembered. Gray at the temples, still wore cufflinks. We shook hands like we hadn't already been through 3 lawsuits and a hostile acquisition together. I thought you were done with this world, he said, slipping into the seat across from me. I was, I said, until someone touched the wrong file. And the wrong woman. He raised a brow. I pulled a folded envelope from my coat pocket, opened it, and slid the contents across the table. A half-dozen printouts, expense sheets, vendor reports, and a curious line item buried deep in the approval trail of Edgewater Phase 2. He didn't speak for a while, just read. Then he set the pages down, leaned back, and exhaled through his nose. Duplicate invoices. Same serial, different vendor name. Clever, but lazy. He tapped one line with his index finger. This one's laundering through a shell. The vendor doesn't even have a legitimate tax ID. Just a mailbox in Nevada. And the payment chain loops right back through an old transitional account. Yours. He looked up. He's using your dormant identity as a firewall. If this goes public, Connor's finished. No internal cover-up, no golden parachute. We're talking full-blown securities fraud. Maybe even jail. I don't need him jailed, I said. Just erased. Martin's smile was thin. So we surface it. Quietly. Discretion? I said. Is still your specialty, yes? He nodded. I'll need a week. Maybe less if legal's still lazy. Half the board won't even remember what 17B covers. But the moment I drop this at the compliance chair's desk, you'll get your seat back. Temporarily. That's all I need. We ordered lunch, 2 salads and waters. Talked a little about his daughter's wedding, his second wife's obsession with yoga, the ridiculous price of oysters. But the papers between us might as well have been TNT. Every word was just time ticking toward detonation. After we parted, I didn't go home right away. Drove a few blocks out of my way to clear my head. Parked near the old viaduct I helped design in my early 30s. I used to bring Lydia here when it was still under construction. She said it made her feel like she was watching something permanent rise out of dust. Funny how things shift. When I walked into the house that afternoon, I could smell basil. She was making her tomato soup, the one she only bothered with when she wanted to seem thoughtful. She didn't hear me at first. She was in the den, hunched slightly, phone glowing in her hand. Her thumb moved slow, paused, moved again. The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite a smirk. Everything okay? I asked. She jolted, turned. The phone disappeared into her sweater sleeve pocket like a coin vanishing in a magician's hand. Oh yes, just texting with Ella about some event next weekend. I walked past her. The soup was starting to boil. You don't have to cook, I said. I already ate. Oh, her voice dropped half a register. Okay. I could feel her eyes on my back. Not curious. Not warm. Wary. She didn't know anything yet. Not technically. But she felt it. That something was different. It was in the way I moved. The way I didn't ask her how her day was. The way I opened the fridge, scanned it, and closed it without taking anything. The air was thinning. That's how it starts. Not with screaming. Not with confrontation. Just pressure. Invisible. Rising. A shifting in the atmosphere so subtle you can't explain it. But you feel it in your teeth. I went into the study. Closed the door. Sat at the desk. The leather notebook was waiting. I opened it. Wrote one line. Martin in play. Compliance next. Pressure. Applied. Then, underneath that, I scribbled something she once said to me years ago, right before I proposed. You're quiet. But I always feel safer when you're in the room. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I closed the notebook, stood, and went upstairs. She didn't ask me where I'd been. Didn't ask who I'd met. But when she passed me in the hallway, her eyes darted to my coat pocket. Just for a second. She was beginning to understand. Not what I'd done, but that I was doing something. And soon it would be far too late to stop it. The call came just after sundown. I was sitting in the sunroom, pretending to read, the light from the floor lamp casting a soft glow across the page but not into my eyes. Lydia was upstairs, in the bath, humming something tuneless and content. The moment the screen lit up with Martin's name, I already knew the answer. Connor used your old transitional account as a shell, Martin said. No greeting, no fluff. I didn't speak. That activates the clause, he continued, voice low. 17B, full board review. You're entitled to immediate re-entry, transitional officer. Oversight, access, voting rights. Pause. Then, Dan, this isn't just internal fraud. There are SEC violations buried in this. If we dig 2 layers deeper, we're in indictment territory. I didn't flinch. I'm not digging for headlines. I know. I just want my hands back on the levers. Another pause. You sure you're ready to walk back into that room? I never really left. We hung up without another word. I placed the book on the side table. The same one she'd given me for my birthday 4 years ago with the handwritten note inside. For the man who never stops building. At the time, I thought it was romantic. Now, I saw it for what it was. Flattery for stability. A tribute to predictability. She never imagined what I was capable of building when no one was watching. Upstairs, I heard the bathwater drain. Feet padding across tile. The soft thud of a cabinet closing. I stood, slow. My hands were steady. My breath calm. But something deep inside me had rotated, like the tightening of steel wire in concrete. The moment had arrived. The blueprint was no longer theoretical. Now it was in motion. She came down 10 minutes later, barefoot, robe tied too loosely for modesty. Her hair damp, skin flushed. She poured herself a glass of wine like it was any other Tuesday. "I talked to Connor today," she said. I didn't answer. I was cleaning my glasses. Calm. Focused. "He said I should really consider a consulting pivot. Maybe even jump into development strategy. He knows people. Said he could open some doors." I placed my glasses back on. Looked at her. No expression. No signal. Just one line. Interesting choice of words. She froze. Her smile held for 1 second too long, like a mask mid-slippage. Then it faltered. She blinked. Swallowed. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer. Just picked up my glass of water, took a slow sip, and walked past her. In that exact moment, the temperature of the room dropped by 10 degrees. Not literally, but she felt it. She turned slightly as if to call after me, but didn't. And that silence, her hesitation, her uncertainty, was the first crack. I went into my study and closed the door. Not loudly, not angrily, just firmly. Inside, I sat at the desk and opened the notebook. Legal trigger activated. Clause 17B executed. Status: officer in play. I underlined executed twice. Then, a new entry. Personal interference confirmed. Lydia, aware. Or close. The thing about structures, physical, legal, emotional, is they all rely on stress tolerances. Push too hard in one place too fast and the system resists. But apply pressure gradually, distribute the weight just right, and the whole thing shifts under your fingers like clay. No explosions. No alarms. Just quiet transformation. That's what was happening now. Lydia thought she was dipping her toes into something flirtatious. Something playful. Something she could laugh about with her friends over overpriced cocktails. She didn't realize she was walking barefoot through a minefield. And now she'd triggered the fuse. The consulting pivot? That was the tell. That was the moment I knew Connor wasn't just using her for proximity or attention. He was trying to use her. Tie her into vendor approvals. Possibly launder decisions through her as an external advisor. Attach her name to things she'd never be able to legally explain. He wasn't just sleeping with her. He was setting her up to take a hit if things went south. So I wouldn't just burn him. I'd sever her from him. Surgically. Before either of them realized what I'd already done. I walked back into the hallway. She was still standing by the counter, holding the glass of wine, untouched. She didn't speak. Neither did I. But in her eyes, I saw it now, fear. Not full-blown. Not panic. But the first hint. The recognition that the rules had shifted. That maybe, just maybe, she'd misjudged me. Good. Let her wonder. Let her sweat. Because the next time she heard Connor's name, it wouldn't be in a cozy dinner conversation. It'd be in a boardroom, with my voice across the table. And her fate, whether she realized it or not, already written in the margins of a clause she never bothered to read. The revolving glass doors hissed open like they recognized me. That was the first sign. Gorman Hale's headquarters hadn't changed much in 5 years. Maybe a new coat of paint, new art installation in the atrium. Some expensive abstract piece trying too hard to look profound. But the bones were the same. I could still feel the way the light angled through the upper glass, how the HVAC timing created just the slightest breeze through the elevator hall around 2:45 p.m. I helped design it that way. Efficient airflow means less distraction. Less distraction means fewer excuses. As I walked across the marble lobby, heads began to turn. Slowly at first, then like a ripple. The older ones recognized me instantly. The interns just stared, glancing at their managers for a cue on whether to act busy or introduce themselves. I didn't slow down. The receptionist looked up from her monitor. Her face registered polite confusion, then surprise, then something close to reverence. "Mr. Keene?" she asked, almost whispering. I gave a curt nod. "Tell Connor I'll need the 3 p.m. slot. And tell legal I'll be needing my transitional credentials restored." Her fingers twitched. "Sir, of course let me." "No rush," I said, though the air had already changed. There was a rush, a current moving beneath the surface, tugging wires loose and shifting weight in the frame. I took the elevator up without being asked for clearance. Old access cards don't expire when you're the one who signed the original digital policy. I stepped into the 17th floor, the executive wing, and it was like stepping back into my own muscle memory. I'd walked these halls so many times, I didn't need to look at the nameplates. I could feel who sat where based on the sound of their typing. As I passed the conference room, someone inside froze mid-sentence. Another stood up. No words, just that universal body language of he's back. When I reached the glass door to legal, Jenna, Martin's old assistant, stood up before I even knocked. "We've been expecting you," she said. "I imagine you have," I replied. She handed me a manila envelope. Inside, reactivation credentials, oversight clearance, and a temporary advisory badge. I clipped it on without hesitation. The weight of it felt appropriate. Back in the main hall, the whispers had spread. Someone tried to offer a hand. I nodded politely but didn't slow my pace. I didn't need handshakes. I needed gravity. And gravity was returning fast. Connor's office was at the end of the hall. He wasn't inside. But his assistant was Chelsea, I remembered. Ambitious, calculating. The type who took notes even when no one asked her to. She looked up, saw me, blinked twice. "Mr. Keene, tell him I'm in the building. And that I'll see him at 3 p.m. She swallowed. He's. Tell him. I turned and walked away. Not fast. Not slow. Just precise. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Daniel." Connor's voice was tight, thin, practiced but unraveling. "This is sudden." I waited a beat. So was the hand on my wife. Silence. A long one. I think there's been some look, this is being blown out of proportion. Lydia and I were just... "Connor," I said evenly. "Save it. This isn't personal." Another pause. Confusion now. "It's not. No. It's structural." Click. I hung up before he could say another word. Let him stew in it. Let him turn over the phrase in his mind until it kept him up at night. Structural. Not emotional. Not angry. Just inevitability. Dressed in a three-piece suit and headed to a boardroom. Back on the 17th floor, I took a moment by the window that overlooked the river. Edgewater was visible in the distance, cranes still idle. Foundation not poured. Project frozen mid-gesture. Promise not yet kept. Fitting. As I turned, a familiar face passed me. Linda Brenner. So. She looked at me, eyes sharp behind her glasses. "You're here," she said flatly. "I am." She nodded once. "Good." And just like that, I knew I wasn't walking back into enemy territory. I was returning to a building that remembered its architect. The walls don't forget. The steel doesn't forget. The people might. But the structure? It always remembers who laid the foundation. And now I was back. Not to reminisce, but to calculate the pressure required for collapse. I placed it on her desk just before she got home. No note. No explanation. Just a plain white envelope sealed, square, surgical. Like the kind that comes with test results you already fear but still hope to survive. Her desk was a carefully curated zone, mood lamp, scented candle, some inspirational quote in a brushed gold frame that read, "You are your best investment." Appropriate in its own nauseating way. I didn't wait around to watch her find it. Instead, I walked out to the garage and started organizing old toolboxes I hadn't touched in years. Funny how silence becomes its own kind of sound when you know exactly what's happening in the house behind you. I could feel it the moment she entered her office. The pause, the rustle of paper, the thick, dragging quiet that came when she reached the third item. Inside that envelope, I'd included 4 things. First, her entire text history with Connor. Every word she thought had disappeared into some encrypted grave. Pulled from our cloud backup, decrypted, printed with timestamps. All of it. The flirtations, the hotel meetups, the petty digs about my old man energy. She had a fondness for that phrase. Used it more than once. Second, a photo. Crisp, clear. Her and Connor at a different event 2 months ago. One I'd allegedly been too tired to attend. He had his hand on the small of her back again. Her face was tilted up toward him, mid-laugh, caught in that private gravity people have when they think no one is watching. Third, a printed HR complaint. Not hers. Another woman, different department, filed against Connor 6 months prior. For inappropriate comments. Unwelcome physical contact. Settled quietly. Buried fast. But not gone. Not from the internal audit archive. And finally, a copy of Clause 17b. Highlighted. Annotated. With one sticky tab pointing to a single line. In the event of financial impropriety tied to a transitional asset, the named partner may resume oversight, with full access to internal proceedings. I didn't write a single word, didn't offer context. The folder was the conversation. That night, she didn't come down for dinner. I didn't call her. I didn't make a scene. I just cooked, ate alone, cleaned up, the same pattern she'd grown comfortable ignoring. Around 10:20, I heard the bathroom door close upstairs. Then the sobbing started. Not loud, not performative, the kind of crying you do when you don't want anyone to hear, but can't stop. Ragged, intermittent, like a dam failing in places, struggling to hold back what it no longer can. She didn't come to bed. I stayed in the living room, reclined in the chair she once tried to get rid of because it didn't match the decor. I read a few pages of an old structural integrity manual, the kind with diagrams and equations she never bothered to understand. Then I turned off the light and let the house sink into silence. She must have known it was coming. Somewhere inside, buried beneath whatever thrill she got from playing games she didn't understand, she must have known. The unease in her glances, the way she stopped leaving her phone face up, the little jumps she gave when I walked into a room too quietly. But she underestimated the most dangerous kind of man. The one who doesn't yell. No confrontation. No screaming match. No melodramatic ultimatums. Just facts. Cold, undeniable surgical facts. She wanted a consulting pivot? Consider this a hard redirection. By morning, I knew she wouldn't be able to look me in the eye. And I wouldn't need her to. She'd already seen everything she needed. No more illusions. No more chances. Just the quiet recognition of what happens when the foundation finally shows you where the cracks are. And who put them there. 3 days later, I stood in the very room where I'd once presented a model that saved the company $12 million in structural retrofits. That day, no one applauded. They just nodded like what I did was inevitable. Because to them, I wasn't a man, I was a calculator in a suit. Today, I was something else. The boardroom was glass-paneled, sleek, and cold. 12 chairs. 11 filled. The 12th mine was waiting. Leather. High-backed. Still marked advisory on the brass plate. A label that once made me feel like a relic. Now it was a weapon. Connor sat at the far end. Tie tight, jaw tighter. His skin had that waxy pallor people get when they've run out of rehearsed lines. To his right, his legal rep, probably flown in from out of state. Young, loud shoes, fake confidence. "Let's begin," Linda said, tapping the table twice like a gavel. Her eyes met mine, then turned to Connor. "Mr. Keene, you have the floor." I didn't raise my voice, didn't lean in for drama. I simply slid a slim black folder into the center of the table and opened it like a map. Inside, pages of documentation, vendor transfers, layered subcontracts, payment approvals signed under Connor's name, all linked to inactive accounts, shell firms, and unregistered vendor numbers. I passed out the copies like I was handing out the weather report. This is a summary of 6 transactions routed through dormant holding accounts, one of which, I paused, was listed under my transitional ID. Illegally reactivated, used to mask a bid cycle for Edgewater Phase 2. Connor shifted. His lawyer opened his mouth, but I raised a hand without looking at him. These aren't allegations. They're transactions. Verified, time-stamped, internally pulled. Linda nodded slowly. "How long has this been active?" "For months. At minimum." "Who else approved?" "No one," I said. He routed everything through emergency authorization triggers tied to project acceleration clauses. Clever on paper. But in execution, it left fingerprints. The room was silent except for the shuffle of paper. Then I added, casually, also included our previous complaints. 2 flagged by compliance, 1 settled by HR, none addressed by executive oversight. Given their nature and the timeline, I'm formally requesting a retroactive HR audit alongside this investigation. Connor's lawyer stood. "This is character assassination. You have no proof those previous claims." "I don't need character. I have contracts," I replied. "And as of 72 hours ago, I have transitional authority to oversee investigative integrity. This meeting is a formality." Linda looked at me. "You're pushing for suspension?" "Pending full review, yes." She didn't hesitate. "All in favor?" 10 hands rose without pause. 1 abstained, Connor, of course. "Suspension granted," she said. "Effective immediately. Access revoked. Assets frozen. Review begins tomorrow." Connor didn't speak, just sat there, absorbing it like a man watching his name being scrubbed off a building in slow motion. "Thank you," I said, gathering the papers. I stood, buttoned my jacket. "One more item," I added, turning back toward the table. "I'm submitting a formal request to open HR's closed archive on internal conduct violations between 2019 and 2023. There are patterns we've missed. I think it's time we stop missing them." No one objected. As I walked toward the door, Linda said quietly, "Welcome back, sir." I paused, glanced over my shoulder. "I never left," I said. And I hadn't. Not really. My name might have been off the letterhead. My email retired. But structures remember their builders. And the rot that had festered in my absence was never going to clean itself. The moment I exited the boardroom, I passed Connor's assistant. She looked up, eyes wide, lips parted. I gave her a single nod. She dropped her gaze. The halls felt different now. Not because the floor tiles changed. Not because the scent of the air fresheners had shifted from citrus to pine. But because control had returned to the foundation. To the architect. To me. And this time I wasn't here to draft new plans. I was here to pull beams. Quietly. Deliberately. Until the entire damn thing fell right on top of the ones who thought they could steal it. The smell hit me the moment I opened the door. Rosemary, garlic, butter. The pan-seared kind that clings to fabric and memory. She'd gone all out. The dining table was set like something from a magazine. Linen napkins, candles, real wine glasses, not the mismatched ones we usually grabbed from the dishwasher. And in the center, 2 plates. Steak, medium rare, with roasted carrots and some wild rice pilaf she probably Googled 20 minutes before I got home. It was the meal she used to make when she wanted to celebrate something. Or fix something. She stood at the edge of the kitchen, back straight, apron still on. Her lipstick was fresh, eyes a little red, like she'd just finished crying and tried to fix it with concealer. "Hi," she said. I nodded, set my keys down, took off my coat. I thought we could eat, just talk. Like before. I pulled the chair out. Saturday. She moved slowly, like someone approaching a sleeping animal they weren't sure was tame anymore. She sat across from me, picked up her fork, set it down. "It didn't mean." "Don't define it," I said, cutting in before she could ruin it with a lie. "Own it." Her mouth opened, closed. She blinked hard. "I didn't plan it," she said, her voice trembling. "It just happened. I was lonely, and you were so distant, and he." I reached into my coat pocket and slid an envelope across the table. White, unassuming, a twin to the one I'd left on her desk. She looked at it like it might explode. "What is this?" I said nothing. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside, a formal separation agreement. Asset division breakdown, fair and efficient. A mediation schedule already coordinated and booked. She didn't even finish reading the first page before the color drained from her face. "You're serious?" she whispered. I picked up my knife, cut into the steak. It was cooked well. She'd paid attention. Too late. "You never even raised your voice," she said. "You just decided." I didn't respond. "Daniel, her voice cracked. "Please, this isn't you. You're not this cold." "No," I said calmly. "I'm just finally warm enough to stop pretending." She broke right there. Not dramatically. No sobs or screams. Just this quiet, broken collapse in her chair. Shoulders caved inward. Fork clattered onto the plate. She buried her face in her hands like she was trying to hold the shame inside, as if keeping it in her palms could somehow reverse time. I chewed, swallowed, sipped the wine she poured. She didn't touch her food. Every few minutes, she'd look up, eyes wet, mouth open, searching for some thread, some old version of me she could still reach. But that man wasn't at the table anymore. That man had been retired the second another man's hand slid across her waist and she let it linger. Now there was only this, calculated distance, silent execution. "I never meant to hurt you," she said softly. "Then you shouldn't have gambled on my silence," I replied, dabbing my mouth with the cloth napkin. She stared. I stood, took my plate to the sink, rinsed it, placed it gently in the dishwasher. Every movement deliberate. Behind me she sat motionless, the mediation schedule still in her hands like a death notice. "I'll be staying at the lake house for now," I said. "You'll find the rest of the logistics in that envelope." I've arranged for counsel. He's clean. Doesn't know either of us. She tried to say something. I didn't wait to hear what. By the time I walked out the front door, the candles were still burning, untouched. Her steak sat cold on the plate, and the only sound in the house was the low hum of the dishwasher, scrubbing away the last meal we'd ever share together. Not because of anger, but because I had finally stopped feeding ghosts. The conference room was smaller than the boardroom but colder. No windows, just acoustic tiles, hard chairs, and fluorescent lights that made everyone look vaguely sick. Connor sat at the far end, no suit jacket this time, his tie loose like he was trying to signal he was still in control. His lawyer sat beside him, face carved from stone but eyes darting. They knew what this was. It wasn't negotiation. It was extraction. 2 chairs to my right, the court reporter typed with the metronomic precision of someone who'd long since stopped reacting to human ugliness. Across the table sat HR, legal, compliance, and me. The door opened, and the first woman stepped in. She didn't speak right away, just looked at Connor like she was studying a carcass. Then she sat, hands folded, voice low but steady. Her story was clinical. Dates, meetings, comments. One incident in a parking garage. Another on a conference trip. She had screenshots, receipts. She spoke like someone who had nothing to gain, but wanted the record to know anyway. Connor didn't look at her. His lawyer tried to object twice. Both were overruled. After 15 minutes, she stood. Didn't thank anyone. Just walked out. The second woman entered 5 minutes later. She was younger, nervous. Connor's former assistant. The one who had gone quiet after the incident. HR brushed it off as misunderstood tone. She hadn't spoken to anyone about it since. Until now. She cried halfway through. Not out of drama, out of humiliation. She described how he had placed his hand on her lower back during a strategy review. Called her sweetheart in front of a vendor. Sent a 2 a.m. message asking if she wore glasses at home too. The entire room stayed quiet. Connor didn't deny any of it. Because he couldn't. By the time the deposition paused for a break, his lawyer leaned in and muttered something to him. Connor just shook his head, face pale and clammy. Legal leaned toward me. We'll recommend a quiet deal. Resignation. No suit. Walkaway clause. I didn't even blink. No settlement. We do this clean. He sighed. Daniel. He used my account. He leveraged my name. He touched people like they belonged to him. We don't reward that with silence. There was a long pause. Then, understood. They resumed the review. Connor's voice, when he finally spoke, was broken. He admitted to occasional unprofessional conduct. Phrased like a man who thought nuance might save him. It wouldn't. I let the lawyers handle the rest. My job wasn't to prosecute. It was to clear the rot from the beams. One cut at a time. Precise. Surgical. And Lydia? Her name never came up. Not once. I made sure of that in advance. Scrubbed her from the paper trail. Rerouted anything personal through private arbitration. She had no formal role in the company. No evidence tying her directly to vendor routing or compliance oversight. Her affair was a moral failure. But I wasn't going to let her become collateral damage in a fraud deposition. Because she wasn't a player anymore. She was a footnote. Just a woman who gambled wrong. Who placed her bet on the man with the flashiest smile and the weakest spine. She knew it too. I could see it in her silence around the house. How she avoided eye contact. How she walked softer. Like even the floorboards might indict her. She didn't ask about the company. Didn't ask about Connor. She just moved through the days like someone waiting for the final page of a story she no longer belonged to. There would be no headlines. No press leak. No internal memo framed with PR gloss. Just a closed-door deposition, followed by a name being quietly removed from systems, contracts, and hallways. The kind of erasure that doesn't leave blood. Just absence. The kind that lingers in rooms long after the person is gone. When I stepped outside after the session, the sky was dull gray. A breeze moved through the trees like it was clearing something out. Connor was done. And Lydia? She already was. The box arrived on a Thursday. No return address. No courier signature. Just a plain brown carton dropped on her doorstep like a sentence. She sat on the floor when she opened it, knees drawn up, her fingers clumsy with the flaps. I watched from the car across the street, engine idling, lake house address in my GPS and a quiet smile I didn't bother to hide. Inside the box. A framed wedding photo, glossy, all smiles and varnished promise. The version she'd kept on the mantel despite everything. The second item was the same photo, burned halfway through, charred black across the groom's face like a confession that wouldn't burn clean. A note folded in half and a single line scrawled beneath in ink that trembled only a little. That man laid a hand on you once. I removed his hand from the future. Underneath, a sentence in my handwriting, harsher, smaller, almost clinical. You mistook silence for weakness. You won't make that mistake again. She read it twice. The third time. The first time she looked up, there was a question in her eyes. How dare he? The second time the question turned into something colder. What did he want? The third time, she lifted the charred frame, fingers tracing the blackened edge where half of him still smiled at her. And she understood the geometry of the thing. That photo was the symbol. A thing that held the past in a fixed lens and now, half destroyed, demanded interpretation. In my world, a burned edge makes a line you can measure. It shows stress, heat, direction. The rest is just context. She pressed the frame to her chest like an attempt to flatten the future back into the shape she remembered. She stayed on the floor for a long time. People cry in different ways. She cried quietly, like someone trying to release steam without tripping the fire alarm. At some point she whispered, small and venomous, "You're just paranoid. It's all your work. Manipulation as defense." I'd heard that tone before, on the phone from her friends, in the thin laughs she gave when lies were convenient. It was always meant to pin blame somewhere outside her hands. If I'd been there, I might have given her a snide answer. Paranoid? Funny. I wonder how many more consulting pivots he booked at the Marriott. Instead, I let the silence do the work. Silence makes people fill space with things that aren't there. Rumors. Denial. Regret. Mostly regret. Connor was gone. The firm blacklisted him with a speed I'd planned for and executed like a contractor demolishing a dangerous wall. His name removed from files. His office emptied in a single morning by a man who'd thought his charm could buy immunity. Chelsea, Connor's assistant, the secondary antagonist who had tried to paper over invoices and alter timestamps, was quietly escorted to a different department with a non-disclosure and a career that suddenly narrowed into irrelevance. She'd been the one with the access keys. She'd thought loyalty to youth would protect her. Didn't. Loyalty, in my experience, is a currency that changes value depending on who holds the ledger. Lydia moved into a small condo. Her choice, she said later, though I suspect the honesty of that line was as thin as tissue. She paid for it with savings I'd never touched. She wanted to be independent. Fine. Independence comes at a price. She discovered that price in the ash stains on that frame, in the paper trail I'd left like breadcrumbs for her conscience. People ask if revenge feels like victory. They expect fireworks and confessionals. They want catharsis. The truth is narrower. It's an equation. Leverage plus patience equals outcome. I took away his leverage. I preserved mine. The rest, her humiliation, the quiet erasure of a handsome man with a bad name, was collateral. Scene by scene, I'd moved the pieces. Clause 17b was the key no one bothered to memorize. The old transitional account was the hinge. Martin did the paperwork. Legal did what legal does. The board did what boards do when their chips are stacked against them. The deposition left Connor hollowed out and offered the small mercy of a clean, non-sensational removal. No headlines. No police cars. No melodrama. Just absence. A man whose name would now trigger HR flags in databases. A resume with a thin line where a career once lived. She called once before I left town. I listened. She said things I've heard women say 1,000 times when the math suggests partnership and promises are liabilities. You're overreacting. You turned everything into a game. You made me small. You made them small. Her voice was equal parts accusation and pleading. Manipulation by way of guilt. It's not like you don't do your own work. This is just your job. You're the engineer. You're always measuring. Funny, I said, as dry as dust. Engineers measure loads. You misread the load. She wanted me to stop, to pivot, to perform regret publicly. I refused. Public repentance is a currency I don't trade. I had already arranged her exit in private. An envelope of terms that let her leave without spectacle. I didn't make her bankrupt. I didn't make her destitute. I made her accountable. The difference matters. When I drove west, the road was long and straight, sun flattening the fields into amber. I didn't look back. Not because I was free of consequence, but because consequences don't always need witnesses. They need balance sheets. They need signatures. They need a man who remembers how to remove a hand from a future and replace it with the structural reality of absence. In the rear view, the town narrowed. The things I'd left behind, the house, the life, the skeleton of marriage, shrank into an angle of possibility. The lake house was up ahead, a modest place with calm water and a dock that remembered my footsteps. I'd go there, hollowed not by shame but by the precise work of correction. Was it cruel? Perhaps. Was it necessary? To me, yes. The moral ledger is not always neat. I built a life reminding myself that nothing stays standing without a foundation. I broke what needed breaking, not for noise, but for balance. She held the charred photo until the frame cooled in the small condo. Outside, the city moved on, the kind of movement that buries things under new meetings, new appointments, new small griefs. Connor's suit hung in a closet he never opened. Chelsea's inbox collected unopened messages. Lydia learned the quiet geometry of regret, the way it fits into a life like a missing beam. And I drove west, not screaming, not triumphant, just driving, with the notebook in the glove compartment and Clause 17b folded in my wallet like a small, cold manifesto. Not all victories come with parades. Some you measure in empty rooms and the clean edges of burned photographs. Some you take with you toward the water, where you can listen to the long, indifferent tide and decide what you will build next.